AMD sneaks up on the RTX 3080 by NVIDIA. Can the RX 6800 XT keep up with Theme Green, and what are its pros and cons? This is what today's video is all about. For my specific review, I have the Radeon RX 6800 XT here by the board partner ASRock, albeit what we're looking at pretty much is the AMD reference design and cooler. Apparently, production of such reference cards by AMD hasn't stopped yet, as was suggested a few months back. This likely has something to do with the shortages and general market situation right now. Anyway, while working on this very video, when checking out retailers, such a 6800 XT starts at around $1,000 and goes all the way up to $1,200. Well, actually, there doesn't even seem to be a cap in place for the pricing. So sadly, I once again have to resort back to the MSRP, the manufacturer's suggested retail price, which for the RX 6800 XT, according to AMD, is at $649. Such a price we can only dream of, however. Nonetheless, I was lucky enough to get a hold of one at a fairly reasonable price thanks to my secret Greek weapon going by the name of Georgios over at the hardware shop Equipper. I had to wait many months, but my patience did pay off in the end. So this also is the explanation on why I'm so extremely late to reviewing this card. But hey, it doesn't even seem to matter, since most of us apparently can only dare to fantasize about purchasing this high-end graphics card anyway. It's close to non-existent on the market anyway, when looking at it realistically. Let's hope the whole situation does actually improve in the near future. So this is where my thanks goes out to the kind Georgios over at Equipper. Without him, this video you're watching right now wouldn't even exist. Hashtag not sponsored. Alright, now let's take a look what the RX 6800 XT actually is capable of and what its pros and cons are compared to the RTX 3080 by NVIDIA. Let's go. Now, to get a better idea on what we are actually dealing with here, in theory at least, let's compare the MSRP of both AMD and NVIDIA of their respective graphics cards. As mentioned before, the RX 6800 XT therefore would come in at $649. According to NVIDIA, we should be looking at $699 for the RTX 3080. As always though, I have to point out that these are the prices of reference/founders edition cards. Custom models by board partners tend to cost a fair bit more. So in theory, AMD with their 6800 XT seems to be offering the more affordable option. Maybe they have to be the cheaper alternative once we get to the drawbacks of that GPU. When putting the specs side by side, you'll most likely immediately notice the big difference in video memory. The RTX 3080 comes along with 10 GB, whereas the 6800 XT offers a whopping 16 GB. It needs to be said, though, that NVIDIA equips their card with the faster GDDR6X memory. Other than that, the remaining specs appear fairly similar, more or less. Noteworthy on the AMD side of things, however, is the implementation of so-called Infinity Cache with a capacity of 128 MB. We could practically call this some sort of level 3 cache. Pretty interesting. There has been done a lot of marketing for one very specific feature though, AMD Smart Access Memory. Basically, it's AMD's term for resizable bar or resizable base address register. In a few short words, it allows the CPU to process a whole lot more VRAM, video memory, at once. The competitor NVIDIA has more or less already confirmed they will roll out and support resizable bar in the near future as well. Now let's talk a little bit about the graphics card, design, build quality, as well as noise levels and cooling. Sometime late January this year, I've reviewed the little brother or sister of the 6800 XT, the RX 6800 Non-XT, also in AMD's reference design. In fact, in terms of design and cooling, we are more or less talking of the same exact card, albeit with one significant difference. Today's RX 6800 XT is exactly 10mm thicker than the RX 6800 version, thus features a whole lot more aluminum, and it also shows in terms of weight. The build quality is very high, no complaints whatsoever here. We are talking of a fairly robust metal shroud with a slight rubberized surface. Needless to say, there also comes a metal backplate into play, and from a sole aesthetic point of view, I kinda prefer the AMD reference design over the current NVIDIA one. But that's debatable at the end of the day, simply a matter of taste. Obviously, this card features a triple fan setup, which out of the box happens to operate semi-passively, meaning under light loads and at low temperatures, the fans won't even spin up. In fact, I for my part can state that AMD has gone for a very mild fan curve on their 6800 XT. Even at full load, the card operates remarkably quiet for my standards. That I didn't expect. This, however, does somewhat show when glancing over to the temperatures, to which we'll get a bit later into the video. As usual, my AMD Ryzen 9 5950X test system takes on the duty, along with the great and reliable ASRock X570PG Velocita or Velocita motherboard, as well as the Deepcool Castle 240EX AIO liquid cooler. As for testing, all the graphics cards will be tested at a screen resolution of 4K UHD as well as WQHD 1440p. After all, AMD primarily markets this thing for 4K gaming. On top of that, I will rerun all the benchmarks for you with Smart Access Memory SAM for short, or resizable bar enabled. Pretty crazy that AMD now is capable of hitting over 2000 MHz on the GPU out of the box. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider on average, we're looking at maybe something along the lines of 2300 MHz. But at the end of the day, GPU clocks don't tell a whole lot. It depends on the architecture that goes along with it. At this point, I would like to give a shout out to Enermax and thank them. No, I'm not being paid for this, just out of transparency reasons, I'm labeling this section as an ad. A few months ago, Enermax has kindly provided me with their Max Titan 1250 watt power supply for my workstation PC. So basically, the PC I use to produce all the videos. Yes, that one can draw quite a bit of power. It consists of an AMD Threadripper CPU, and hopefully, when the time is right, I can install that RTX 3090 GPU in there. And I simply want to be ready for those notorious extreme peaks in power consumption. So, thank you, Enermax. Alright, now without further ado, let's dive into the benchmarks. undoubtedly, NVIDIA with their RTX 3080 has gotten some serious competition. The RX 6800 XT sneaks up on the 3080 dangerously close, and it's not necessarily rare to see Team Red take home some victories. However, let's focus on the FPS average in games. It paints a fairly clear picture. AMD and NVIDIA deliver a neck-and-neck race. What I've noticed is that AMD in many game titles does a little better in WQHD 1440p tests, whereas NVIDIA in those same exact titles performs a little better at 4K. Nonetheless, we have to admit the RTX 3080 does consistently tend to deliver better results overall, while the 6800 XT with enabled smart access memory does find its way to the very top in a few games, even surpassing the monster RTX 3090. Such behavior still remains pretty much an exception and not the rule. Furthermore, AMD obviously still has its weaknesses with ray tracing. The RDNA 2 architecture, after all, is AMD's first attempt on ray tracing on a hardware level. NVIDIA had time to gather some more experience in the meantime. The first attempt by Team Green, as we all know, wasn't really that mind-blowing either. What I personally find to be a bit of a bummer is that game as well as software developers kinda tend to treat AMD second-class-like. What I mean is, with AMD cards, we don't really get to see that widespread ray tracing support, and similar things can be witnessed in the productivity side of things. NVIDIA CUDA and ray tracing have made it much farther by now. Oh well, maybe it just takes time. If AMD manages to hold their current position in the market and they keep releasing quality products, things could definitely change for the better. The hardware for it, AMD after all does already offer. Nonetheless, AMD with their RX 6800 XT does stand its ground in productivity tasks. The sheer raw performance in specific cases easily surpasses that one of the RTX 3090. However, once the NVIDIA RTX 3000 series makes use of its ray tracing capabilities, widely supported by software out there, the advantage we once had with that AMD RX 6000 series graphics card starts to dwindle, at least when it comes to rendering. Where AMD, on the other hand, disappoints me big time is encoding. Let's say we, for instance, record gameplay with our graphics cards. NVIDIA delivers far superior quality. I mean, the difference in quality is not that apparent at first sight, but once we zoom in, unfortunately, I wasn't lying. One of the by far best features in a long time introduced by NVIDIA, in my opinion, is DLSS. A DLSS alternative by AMD yet has to see the light of day, but there's great news actually. AMD in the meantime has confirmed they are working on an alternative. But let's compare power draw, power consumption. This is where AMD with their RX 6800 XT manages to impress big time and thus outshine the RTX 3080 by Team Green. The 6800 XT clearly is more power efficient. Generally speaking though, it needs to be said, both cards don't exactly help save power. The latest trend for high-end GPUs, after all, seems to be high power draw. The 6800 XT draws about as much as NVIDIA's RTX 3070. That's pretty nice actually. And as I've already hinted at, AMD's default extremely mild fan curve does show in temperatures. At 76 degrees Celsius, it now is the hottest graphics card I've had in my charts in a long time. However, 76 degrees are absolutely no cause for concern, so do not panic. Which of the two graphics cards should you pick up then, you ask? Let's be real, at the end of the day, pricing and availability decides. Both GPUs actually, the RX 6800 XT as well as RTX 3080, are good choices. You can't really do any wrong with either of them. You just have to look at it this way. NVIDIA does tend to deliver a better, more matured feature set. If you, on the other hand, are only on the hunt for raw, traditional rasterization performance, the RX 6800 XT, without the slightest doubt, is well worth recommending. With that being said, take care everyone, and until the next video.